Oi, fala aí pessoal, bom dia. Você está escutando o Inglês no rádio. I am your host, Foster Hodge. This is your daily dose of English. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Foster from Inglês no and today we have the first guest on Inglês no rádio, Anthony from GringoLingo. What's up, Anthony? How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So, like I said, Anthony, this is the first time I've ever interviewed someone on the podcast, so I have no idea what I'm doing. So apologies for any stupid stuff I say. So cool. Anthony, I wanted to start just, could you just tell me a little bit about who you are, what you're doing? What's your, just a little bit of background about your story.
Yeah, I'm an American living in Brazil, and I guess I've kind of been converted into being Brazilian.
Drink the juice.
Yeah, I was doing, studying in college. I was studying linguistics, but it ended up just being really expensive. I was also trying to join the National Guard. And then I was like, you know what? I'm such a patriot. I'm just going to quit all this and move to Brazil. and I actually tried to get into school here, but the test was all in Portuguese, and my Portuguese was so bad I even got the English questions wrong. So I failed.
Feel you.
But
yeah.
I ended up liking the country so much that I came back and lived here, and I've been back and forth. I've gotten like deported once, kind of, but
yeah, me too.
Really?
Yeah. I tried to extend my visa, where you have to go to the federal police and get an extra 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I went, and the federal police guy was like, no, dude, it was in January. So he's like, you're 180 days renewed or something like that. And then when I went back to actually extend my 90 days, the next guy was like, whoa, man, you've been in the country illegally for 90 days. You need to leave in at least 3 days. And I was like, ugh. And I left like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, I got my 6 months total, and then I just stayed. I didn't go to the federal police or anything. And when I was leaving Brazil, because we ended up at a point where we had like no money, no furniture, nothing, it was bad.
Yeah.
They have that like the exit form you need,
Mm-hmm.
and they saw how long I was. They're like, dude, you stayed way too long. And I was like, I know. And so they went to put my number in the computer, like my passport number in the system, but I guess the system crashed or something. They just gave me a passport back, like, hey, don't do that. I came back anyways. Yes.
Yeah. Brazilians are pretty relaxed in terms of immigration compared to Americans, at least.
I think Saudi Arabia is probably more relaxed than the United States is with immigration laws. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. That's another podcast that we could talk for hours about.
Yeah.
Cool. So the first time you went to Brazil, where did you go?
I came here to Sao Paulo, and just the Sao Paulo area. I stayed in, where was it? There's like apparently 2 centers here. There's like the older one, which has Paulista, and then I was near like Liberdade, and it was honestly probably not the best place to get your first impression of Brazil, but I loved it. I'm the kind of person who finds magic in everything. So there was like, even if there's trash on the ground, I'm like, oh, cool, Brazilian trash, or like graffiti, cool. Like anywhere I go, I'm like that. So,
I'm the same way, man. So the trash is so much different here. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool part of town, man. Liberdade, the centro in São Paulo is really cool. Kind of sketchy in some parts, but it's a cool place.
Yeah, I should be more cautious of these things. Like the things I need to be worried about, safety or crime, I'm not worried about. I'm scared of like octopuses, the most random things. But
Same.
Going out to South America, like whatever.
Same. Yeah. And I catch a lot of grief from Brazilians who are like, yo, man, you really shouldn't do that. And I think it's kind of a blessing and a curse because I definitely probably should not be doing that. But at the same time, it's much more enjoyable and nothing bad's happened to me ever.
Right, right. I kind of like, I understand that there is probably or definitely more crime here, but at the same time, I get the kind of feeling, where you have these people and they're like, oh, I'm from the hood and it was so bad there. And then you have someone else who's like, oh, no, but my hood was worse. I get the same kind of feeling here.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty controversial issue. But I think after living in Brazil for a long time, like now I kind of get freaked out in weird cities in the U.S., you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, I think it's like reverse psychology or something. Yeah. Cool. So now you're living in Brazil full time?
Yep, I still don't have my permanent visa. I'm still on a tourist visa, but that's because there's some sort of immigration reform, and now instead of having different kinds of like marriage or civil union or family, it's just all considered family union visa, and
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of stuck here until I get that fixed
Yeah.
because I can't leave and go back. But
Yeah.
uh,
There are worse places to be stuck.
I was stuck in Canada. That was worse.
Okay. Can you give me the short version of that story?
Yeah, when I was coming to visit the city for the first time, I bought my tickets also the first time from someone else who said they were part of a travel agency. And I brought people's bags with me, and these same people were the ones who recommended this guy. So they weren't trying to scam me or anything. Turns out that the guy was using stolen credit cards, and it had a layover in Canada. And that's when the banks figured out that he was using stolen credit cards. So I was in the airport for 3 days. And then I had a like GoFundMe sort of thing, and people just donated money to get me to Brazil.
That's crazy. Were you in
Yeah.
Toronto?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I always do that flight going from like Toronto to Sao Paulo. Does make sense. That's
I
crazy, man.
know.
That's crazy. Um, yeah, well, I'm glad you're not stuck in the airport. At least you're in a house in a city and you can work and stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Anthony, in general, we try to make this show about learning English, helping Brazilians learn some real English. So, you're an English teacher. Uh,
Mhm.
how long have you been teaching English, and how'd you get started?
Um, I'd say maybe 3 years I've been teaching English, or less, maybe 2.5.
Hmm.
But when I was living in São Paulo the first time, I was living in Barueri, which is like greater São Paulo.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just had nothing to do. So I found some jobs on Craigslist because that's like the Mercado Livre of Americans in Brazil is going on Craigslist.
Exactly. Did the same thing.
And I got this one job in like the headquarters of Walmart, which was just awful. They said I was going to have so many more hours than I did. I found another place and they were also lying to me about the payment, the hours. So I ended up just like advertising to these students and be like, hey, how much are you paying? They're like, I don't know, 70 reais. I'm like, okay, switch to me and I'll do 50. And they're like, okay, sure.
Cut out the
So,
middleman.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then I put like something together on a page. I was like, oh, let's just make a page. So I started GringoLingo, and that's how I got started. I just took the train like an hour and a half one way just to do an hour class and then go back and crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally hear you, man. When I was starting out, at least teaching in Brazil, it's like not making much money with classes. Definitely traveling like an hour both way for classes. Probably
Yeah.
losing money and time, but good experience.
Yeah,
Cool.
for sure.
So I guess before we get too deep into English teaching, why Brazil? I know you're just kind of a lot of random things going on in your life, thinking about National Guard and crazy things, and you randomly ended up in Brazil. Did you choose it for a reason?
Um, so I've thought about this a lot. I have this whole story to this. I like languages. That's my thing. Portuguese is actually the most recent language that I've started studying.
Hmm.
And A couple of years ago, I went on this website to start learning languages, just practice with natives. And during a trip to Washington, I ended up meeting these people who said, "Oh, you should try Portuguese." So I said, "All right." I went back on the site, started trying to practice some Portuguese, or at least learn a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And every time Brazilians get online, any website, come to Brazil, and this was no different on that site. So yeah, I just got the invitation from the internet and gave it a shot.
Just listening to recommendations from
Yeah,
strangers on the internet. Cool. Um,
honestly, if people from Nepal were as inviting as people from Brazil, I could be in Nepal right now.
yeah, yeah, pretty much the same deal with me. Cool, cool. What site were you talking about? Do you remember? To find
It
natives?
was conversation exchange.
Cool. That's like italki, like version 1.0, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know about iTalki. I've never been on it, but I know Conversation Exchange is free. Like you can donate to their site, but everything on it is just free.
Oh, cool, cool. Yeah, italki is kind of the same thing, where you can do normal conversation exchanges for free, or you can hire community tutors, which are just like teachers starting out, or professional tutors. Um, so that's where I used to do a lot of my teaching. That's where a lot of Brazilians on there too. It's a good place to check out. Cool.
Brazilians are active online.
Yeah, they are very digitally savvy. Uh,
Yeah.
have to turn off the notifications on my WhatsApp most of the time because I have groups with like 494 new messages or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Um, cool. So when you're teaching English to Brazilians, how's that experience going? Like, what are some of the things that you really like about it? Maybe some of the things that are more difficult?
I definitely like surprising the students with how simple English is because, I mean, at least in some of the groups I'm on, when people post, they'll correct other people's Portuguese and they're
Mm.
really specific about all these rules that they have. And Portuguese is a pretty complicated language, and a lot of the students come to the classes thinking like, all right, I need to learn this rule, I need to learn verbs and XYZ. And then I show them words like can, like I can, you can, we can. It's all the same. They're like, what do you mean? They're like, I thought this was supposed to be hard. I'm like, try Chinese if you want a really hard language. This is going to be super simple.
Yeah,
Maybe
try
not easy,
tonal
but simple.
languages. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I totally relate to that, man. I cannot tell you how many times, like, Brazilian students, like, beginning, really can't speak much. They're just starting out. And it's like, okay, my first question is about the past, present, perfect, and when you use that instead of the imperfect. And I'm like, dude, no, no, no. Like, let's start, like, let's take a few steps back and just think about, like, with what you said about can. I always say the same thing with, like, I'm. If you can say I am with the contraction I'm, you can say so
Mhm.
many things. Like, I'm
Yeah.
Foster. I'm happy. I'm American. I'm your friend. It's like, that's
Mhm.
way better than thinking about, like, I have been doing, I was doing, just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like to, I hate giving any sort of verbal tenses any names. I hate saying like, all right, let's talk about the past or the present perfect. No, I call it the have you ever, or instead of saying past, I just say yesterday.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so I'm trying to also, I really like the idea of simplifying English because I think most Brazilians, it's like this huge, complicated, crazy thing. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. So, do you have any recommendations, or do you have advice that you would give to Brazilians that they don't really know where to start and it seems super complicated?
Mm, let's see. I would definitely start making a list of the words that they use in their everyday life in Portuguese. Just start off in Portuguese because it's really easy to think or go on any sort of English website or open a book and be like, wow, there's so many words I don't know. But sure, a book's going to be different. If you just take a look at the vocab you need in your daily life, you realize oh, you don't need that many words. I need, I want, I like. That's already a huge part of your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
I normally separate it into nouns, verbs, expressions, and questions, just because the questions part especially is going to be really different. If you're going to need to use like have you ever, or using any sort of yes or no question in Portuguese, which a lot of times we ask with how. So instead of saying like, is the store very far, we say, how far is the store, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really complicated thing for me learning Portuguese. It's just asking questions, especially like I learned Spanish first, and it's pretty
Me
direct,
too.
and it's like, do you like this? Like, te gusta si or no? And then in Portuguese, like, cara, se gostou disso? Não. Se gostou não? Não, não, gostei não. And it's like, well, why are there so many no's? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Cool, cool. Yeah, I kind of have the same idea. I always talk about like kind of writing your script. Like, think about the normal questions that everyone asks you. Like, hey, what are you doing in New York? What is Brazil like? Like, do you like samba? Like, Neymar. And then, like, think about these questions that everyone asks, and then, like, write them down and think about your answers, and then just start there. That's a lot better than starting with, like, the book is on the table or something.
Oh yeah, I cannot stand that sentence, and I make fun of it a lot.
Yeah.
But in my classes, I end up using pizza for everything because it's just a word that everybody already knows. So I talk about using like I like pizza, or we're talking about using nouns as adjectives, and we say cheese pizza, even though cheese is a noun. Like, I make everything back to pizza because then you don't have to think about, there's one less word in that sentence that's new for you that you have to think about. I know this word. All right, let's talk about the order with the words we already know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really cool that you can kind of organically teach people, like, sentence structure without having to actually, like, they just kind of intuitively understand grammar rather than, like, okay, the verb goes here, the noun goes here, then, like, the past participle goes here. If they're like, I like cheese pizza, I don't know why I say that, but I do say that. If we can teach
Right.
Brazilians the same thing, that's way cooler than, like, learning syntax and stuff like that.
Yeah. I have a weird relationship with colors because I guess you'd say I have synesthesia, but I do this
Really?
thing with words.
Very cool.
Yeah. People seem to not people who don't know what it is prior, they normally just think I'm weird and they don't believe me. But I do the same sort of thing in my classes because we use Google Docs, so we can really take advantage of colors. I make all the nouns normally in a sentence from translating green, all the verbs, those are going to be blue, and just a couple things so we can look at the colors and see how they correspond to the order instead of thinking, like, look at all these crazy words. But if we see the colors, then we can associate the order. Even if you just squint your eyes, you can see the difference without seeing the words.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really cool. Like, creating associations that you can't really, explicitly explain, but things that you intuitively know. Like, oh, the green goes before the blue. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So you have, like, straight up real synesthesia. Like, you see colors, and when you're playing music, are you thinking like, C minor chord is like a periwinkle blue or something?
It is actually a dark blue, and an E chord is yellow.
No
but yes.
way. That's crazy.
Yeah. And it sort of depends on what I'm doing. Like on the keyboard, the notes will be different colors. So F is normally orange, and then C and C minor are blue. But if I'm going between instruments, then the piano's blue, strings are green, drums are red. Same thing with numbers and people's personalities.
Whoa.
It's not really like a C thing. It's sort of like it's really close to a smell. So like you can't see a smell, but you're like, oh, that smells like lemons. I'm like, oh, this song sounds blue. Like, it's just hard to explain.
So you just have, like, different sensory connections than most people. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Are you getting any weird smells from me, like telepathically through the Skype?
Any weird smells? I'd say your color is more like a, I don't know the word for it. It's like between green and blue, but it's not a teal. I can't even find anything in here with the same color. I'd find
That
it.
makes me nervous, man. That's awesome. It's fascinating. Cool. Well, we can definitely talk about that later. I could talk about that for hours. Um, cool. So, do you have any like? Are there things that you see in all of your Brazilian students, like difficulties that all Brazilians pretty much have when learning English?
um, yes, there are some things that I see more in beginners, and then some things that just persist regardless of level. Um, a lot of people, a lot of people bring up the words with OUGH, so thought, although, through, tough.
Yeah.
And similar word pairs. They're like, how am I going to know the difference between this word and this word? And then I try and show them the same thing in Portuguese. I'm like, what's the difference between tesouro and tesouro? One is treasure, one is scissors. Like,
Exactly.
you'll see the difference in the context, and they refuse to believe it. They want to hear two very different words and know that. But I tell them, like, you really got to put it in a sentence. You got to know how to use it and stuff, and that'll make a lot more sense than just having a word.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, I try to, if there's something super, super complicated in English, like the OUGH, like cough through all that, like that's crazy in terms of like English is not a phonetic language.
Yeah.
But if you kind of just forget it and you're like, oh yeah, the word for cough, like I'm coughing, oh, I'm going through the tunnel. Like that's pretty simple, you know?
Hmm.
Um, so in general, I recommend just like if something's complicated, just don't think about it and you'll probably get it.
Exactly. Just accept it for what it is. Like, even in Portuguese, I tell the people, I'm like, all right, so eu vou, and so the past tense would be eu vei, and they're like, no, eu fui. I'm like, why? Like, that's just the way it is. I'm like, okay, so
Yeah,
this logic you have, apply that to English. Don't ask why. I don't know why. You won't know why. We don't know why. So just accept it for what it is.
yeah, that's the way it is. That's the way that's the way I say it. So you should say it too.
Yeah. I hate sounding harsh, but I feel like as teachers, there's certain lines we have to draw before the student gets too confused. Like, someone asks why the sky is blue. Oh, it's because the light gets reflected by the oxygen molecules. Blah blah blah. Okay, why? All right, so that's where I'm going to draw the line. Like, I don't know. The important thing is to know everything before that. So people ask, why can't you say would can? Why do you have to say could? You can't? That's it. I could go on and say, oh, well, because would and can are both auxiliary verbs, and you can't mush them together like that. But no, I'm just going to say, we don't say that.
Yeah, yeah. I have this problem a lot that I find myself telling my students like, "You're asking the wrong questions," and then I kind of feel like I'm being an asshole, you know. and
Yeah.
but I think it is kind of it falls on the responsibility of the teacher to be like, hey, your time will be used much more efficiently if you stop worrying about this and just you know let it be what it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I feel like, um, I go to therapy here, and I just think it's good to have that in general, because
For
living in
sure.
another country, you definitely need to feel like you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Because especially in this city, I think I'm the only American, so I definitely feel out of my place. Anyways, a lot of the times what the therapist does is she doesn't really have any of the answers that I need, but she has the questions to ask to arrive at something together. So as teachers, we do the same thing. I could ask them in the first class, what color is the sky? What color is the flowers? What color are your eyes? Okay, but what's your name? That's a better question to ask.
Yeah.
So
Precisely.
it's good to direct them.
Yeah, I like to think of it like a guide. Like I cannot like transmit my English knowledge like directly into your brain, but I can kind
Mhm.
of give you a nudge in the right direction.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I like the therapy example. Never thought of that.